What is the optimum thickness for specimens to be examined under a microscope?
Biological and medical techniques require specimens of 1 to 50 micrometers, with the usual thickness being 4 to 5 micrometers for examination under a light microscope. Since an electron microscope has greater resolution, it requires thinner sections of 20 to 100 for biological specimens. Smear preparation is another standard technique used to prepare slides.
How are fossils dated?
There are two methods for dating fossils. The first is known as relative dating. By determining the age of the surrounding rock, scientists can give an approximate age to the fossils therein. Rocks are dated by their distance from the surface, with older rocks generally deeper from the surface. Using the data from other fossils found in the same rock stratum can also be used to give an approximate date to a new sample. The second method is known as absolute dating. Absolute dating relies on the known rates of radioactive decay within rocks. By measuring the ratio between the radioactive forms of an element like uranium-238 to its non-radioactive decayed form, scientists can determine when the rock formed, because that would be when the radioactive isotope was acquired. Amino acids also convert gradually from one form, the left-handed, to another, right-handed, after an organism dies, and so may be used as a method of dating some fossils.
What is the significance of bee dancing? How is it that within a short time of a bee finding a food source, a great number of fellow bees will converge to gather pollen and nectar?
Communication about the food location occurs through the bee dance. This symbolic language of bees, also known as the waggle dance, is the most complex of all non-human communication systems. By placing sources of food at varying distances and angles from the hives, Carl von Frisch found that forager bees perform either a round dance for food at short distances, 66 to 656 feet or 20 to 200 m, or a waggle dance for food at longer distances. While dancing, the forager also emits sound bursts. The specifics of the dance. Example area the dance occupies on the comb, duration of each cycle, and length of sound bursts, indicate the distance and direction to the food source.
Where are viruses found?
Viruses lie dormant in any environment, land, soil, air, and on any material. They infect every type of cell, plant, animal, bacterial, and fungal.
What are the best temperatures for seed germination?
The best temperatures for seed germination in most plants are 77 degrees Fahrenheit to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 25 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. Some varieties of seeds are able to germinate at temperatures ranging from 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius to 30 degrees Celsius. However, some seeds, such as those of the Rocky Mountain lodgepole pine tree, Pinus contorta, require extreme heat for germination. The cones of the Rocky Mountain lodgepole pine are covered with a resin that binds the scales of the cone. The high temperatures, 113 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, or 45 to 50 degrees Celsius, associated with 202, moderate to severe forest fires are required to melt the resin and release the seeds.
How did geology influence Darwin?
While traveling aboard the HMS Beagle, Charles Darwin read The Principles of Geology by Charles Lyell, 1797 to 1875. Catastrophism was the popular theory of the time about the forces driving geological change. Lyell's theory suggested that geologic change was not solely the result of random catastrophes. Rather, he proposed that geologic formations were most often the result of everyday occurrences like storms, waves, volcanic eruptions, and earthquakes that could be observed within an individual lifetime. This idea, that the same geologic processes at work today were also present during our evolutionary past, is known as uniformitarian. This conclusion also led Lyell and, before him, James Hutton, 1726 to 1797, to suggest that Earth must be much older than the previously accepted age of 6,000 years. Because these uniform processes would have required many millions of years to generate the structures he observed. Reading Lyell's work gave Darwin a new perspective as he traveled through South America and sought a mechanism by which he could explain his thoughts on evolution.
Can one type of fat be changed into another type?
The process of hydrogenation can convert an unsaturated fatty acid into a hydrogenated fatty acid. This process, which is achieved by adding extra hydrogen atoms to unsaturated fat, has become both a bane and a blessing. Hydrogenation is the process that allows unsaturated vegetable oils to be turned into margarine. This method prevents oxidation, and thus rancidity, and has allowed for the development of foods with less animal and saturated fats. However, the consumption of hydrogenated fatty acids may be linked to increased risk of heart disease. Because the fats cause a change in the structure of targeted unsaturated fatty acids, the consumption of trans fats has been shown to slightly increase the levels of bad cholesterol, LDL, in the blood.
Why is liquid water more dense than ice?
Pure, liquid water is most dense at 39.2 degrees Fahrenheit 3.98 degrees Celsius, and decreases in density as it freezes. The water molecules in ice are held in a relatively rigid geometric pattern by their hydrogen bonds, producing an open, porous structure. Liquid water has fewer bonds, therefore, more molecules can occupy the same space, making liquid water more dense than ice.
What is a fruiting body?
Macrofungi such as mushrooms and toadstools produce fruiting bodies. A fruiting body is a structure that enables the dispersal of spores for reproduction. It is the structure of a fungus that is visible above the ground. Fruiting bodies are found in a variety of shapes, ranging from the common cap and stem mushrooms to the more exotic antler-like, coral-like, cage-like, trumpet-shaped, or club-shaped mushrooms. The method of spore dispersal for the various types of macrofungi is related to the shape of the fruiting body.
How did the search for cinnamon lead to the discovery of North and South America?
Christopher Columbus, 1451 to 1506, was one of many explorers trying to find a direct sea route to Asia, which during the 15th century was thought to be rich with spices. Cinnamon and other spices were so valued in Columbus's era that a new direct route to Asia would have brought untold wealth to the discoverer and his country.
How much water does an average sponge circulate during a day?
A sponge that is 4 in, 10 centimeters, tall and 0.4 in, 1 centimeter in diameter pumps about 23 qts, 22.5 L, of water through its body in one day. To obtain enough food to grow by 3 ounces, 100 g, a sponge must filter about 275 gal, 1000 kilograms, of seawater.
What is the most widely cultivated cereal in the world?
Wheat is the most widely cultivated cereal in the world. The grain supplies a major percentage of the nutrients needed by the world's population. Wheat is one of the oldest domesticated plants, and it has been argued that it laid the foundation for Western civilization. Domesticated wheat had its origins in the Near East at least 9,000 years ago. Wheat grows best in temperate grassland biomes that receive 12 to 36 in 30 to 90 centimeters of rain per year and have relatively cool temperatures. Some of the top wheat-producing countries are Argentina, Canada, China, India, the Ukraine, and the United States.
What is parasitism?
Parasitism is an interaction in which one organism, the parasite, co-opts the resources of another organism, the host. By definition, the host is hurt by the association while the parasite benefits. Parasitism can be physical, like the parasitic worms found in the internal organs of animals, or social, like the brood or nest parasitism found in some birds. In these species, resident birds are tricked into incubating the 340 eggs and raising the chicks of interlopers.
Why do ecosystems need decomposers?
While energy flows through ecosystems in only one direction, entering at the producer level and exiting as heat and the transfer of energy as biomass, to consumers, chemical compounds can be reused over and over again. In a well-functioning ecosystem, some organisms make their living, their niche, by breaking down structures and recycling the compounds. These organisms are known as decomposers. Without these organisms, the chemicals used to build a tree would remain locked in the tree biomass for eternity instead of being returned to the soil after the tree's death. From this soil will spring new growth, beginning the cycle once again.
How much weight can an ant carry?
Ants are incredibly strong in relation to their size. Most ants can carry objects 10 to 20 times their own weight. And some ants can carry objects up to 50 times their own weight. Ants are able to carry these objects great distances and even climb trees while carrying them. This is comparable to a 100-pound person picking up a small car, carrying it 7 to 8 miles on his back, and then climbing the tallest mountain while still carrying the car.
What is xenotransplantation?
Xenotransplantation is the transplantation of tissue or organs from one species to another. The development of this technique has led to the breeding of animals specifically for use as human organ donors. Because humans would reject a non-human organ as foreign, transgenic animals, e.g., pigs, are genetically altered with human DNA with the hope of suppressing eventual rejection.
Is there a chemistry to love?
Neurochemicals are released in the physical bodies of two people that are attracted to each other. So one can say that there is indeed a chemical reaction between two people. The neurochemicals involved are phenylethylamine, also found in chocolate, which speeds up the flow of information between nerve cells, dopamine, which makes us feel good, and norepinephrine, which makes the heart race.
What are some examples of polygenic inheritance?
Phenotypes of a given trait that are controlled by more than one gene are described as having polygenic inheritance. Examples of polygenic inheritance in humans include height, weight, skin color, and intelligence. Some congenital malformations, birth defects, like clubfoot, cleft palate, or neural tube defects are also the result of multiple gene interactions.
How many enzymes are there?
Approximately 5,000 enzymes have been named, but there may be a total of 20,000 or more. A metabolic pathway may require a whole complex of enzymes to complete hundreds of reactions.
Which animals can run faster than a human?
The cheetah, the fastest mammal, can accelerate from 0 to 45 miles per hour, 64 kilometers per hour. In 2 seconds, it has been timed at speeds of 70 miles per hour, 112 kilometers per hour, over short distances. In most chases, cheetahs average around 40 miles per hour, 63 kilometers per hour. Humans can run very short distances at almost 28 miles per hour, 45 kilometers per hour, maximum. Most of the speeds given in the table below are for distances of 0.25 mi, 0.4 kilometers.
How many mitochondria are there in a cell?
The number of mitochondria varies according to the type of cell. The number ranges 44 between 1 and 10,000, but averages about 200. Each cell in the human liver has the structure of a chloroplast. Over 1,000 mitochondria. Cells with high energy requirements, such as muscle cells, may have many more mitochondria.
Which plants most commonly form ectomycorrhizal relationships?
The most common plants associated with ectomycorrhiza are trees and shrubs growing in temperate regions. These trees include pines, firs, oaks, beeches, and willows. These plants tend to be more resistant to extreme temperatures, drought, and other harsh environmental conditions. Some ectomycorrhizal fungi may provide protection from acidic precipitation.
Why are carbohydrates a major part of the human diet?
Our cells have evolved in a manner that has made carbohydrates the human body's primary energy source. In fact, the entire metabolic system begins with glucose. While most of the cells in our bodies can adapt, at least temporarily, to using lipids and proteins as energy sources, our brain cells require glucose. This means that when blood glucose levels fall too low, the brain cells shut down and we faint. By fainting, the flow of blood and glucose to the brain is increased.
Why are some animals so brightly colored while others are so dull?
There are two general functions of bright coloration. The individual with such coloration is trying to advertise either to members of its own species, its conspecifics, or to those of other species. Within species, communication revolves around reproductive behavior. Male red-winged blackbirds, for example, use their brightly colored shoulder patches to advertise their territory ownership to potential mates and rivals. An experiment with zebra finches found that females were more likely to choose males as mates if the identification bands on their legs were red rather than some other color. Between species, communication is usually threatening. Warning, or aposematic, coloration is a method used by animals with stings or poison to circumvent attacks. For example, stinging insects like wasps and bees use similar color patterns of yellow and black to advertise their arsenal. Poison dart frogs, family Dendrobatidae, also use bright coloration in this way. Dull or camouflage coloration, as in a flounder, is an alternative strategy. By hiding, these species hope to avoid predation.
Who is the father of mycology?
Elias Fries, 1794 to 1878, is considered the father of mycology. Born in Sweden, he received a degree in philosophy from Lund University in 1814. His first important work on mycology, Observations Mycologici, was published between 1815 and 1818. He devoted his career to the study of botany, concentrating specifically on fungi and lichens. The life cycle of a mushroom.
What plants are commonly used in the perfume industry?
Perfumes are made of a mixture of a large variety of scents. Although many perfumes are created synthetically, the expensive designer scents still use natural essential oils extracted from plants. The perfume industry uses all parts of the plant to create a unique blend of scents.
How do muscle cells respond to activities like weightlifting?
Weightlifting will cause muscles to grow, the size of muscle cells increases. But the body does not actually grow more muscle cells. Rather, weightlifting causes the body to grow more of the thick myosin, and thin actin proteins that aid muscle contraction. This process makes the muscle not only bigger, but stronger as well. Some muscles gain strength faster than others. In general, large muscles, like those present in your chest and back, grow faster than smaller ones, like those in your arms and shoulders. Most people can increase their strength between 7 and 40%. After 10 weeks of training each muscle group at least twice a week.
How can the results of a genetic cross be predicted?
The results of a genetic cross can be predicted using a diagram called a Punnett square, which graphically represents Mendel's laws of segregation and independent assortment. On each side of the square, one places the possible alleles donated by each parent. Dominant alleles are represented by capital letters G in this case, and recessive alleles by lowercase letters, g. Inside the boxes are the allelic combinations, in this case. Each box would contain GG, heterozygous combination.
Why are fall leaves bright red in some years and dull in others?
Two factors are necessary in the production of red autumn leaves. There must be warm, bright, sunny days during which the leaves manufacture sugar. Warm days must be followed by cool nights with temperatures below 45 degrees Fahrenheit 7 degrees Celsius. This weather combination traps the sugar and other materials in the leaves, thus resulting in the manufacture of red anthocyanin. A warm cloudy day restricts the formation of bright colors. With decreased sunlight, sugar production is decreased, and this small amount of sugar is transported back to the trunk and roots, where it has no color effect.
How can animals be grouped according to body symmetry?
Symmetry refers to the arrangement of body structures in relation to the axis of the body. Most animals exhibit either radial or bilateral body symmetry. Animals such as jellyfishes, sea anemones, and starfishes have radial symmetry. In radial symmetry, the body has the general form of a wheel or cylinder, and similar structures are arranged as spokes from a central axis. The bodies of all other animals are marked by bilateral symmetry, a design in which the body has right and left halves that are mirror images of each other. A bilaterally symmetrical body plan has a top and a bottom, also known respectively as the dorsal and ventral portions of the body. It also has a front, or anterior, end and a back, or posterior, end.
What is codes?
CODES is the FBI laboratory's combined DNA index system, which allows federal, state, and local police agencies to compare DNA profiles electronically. CODES uses two indexes: 1, the forensic index, which contains DNA profiles from crime scenes, and 2, the offender index, which contains DNA profiles of individuals convicted of sex offenses and other violent crimes.
What is ultrasound?
Ultrasound is another type of 3D computerized imaging. Using brief pulses of ultra-high-frequency acoustic waves, lasting 0.01 second, it can produce a sonar map of the imaged object. The technique is similar to the echolocation used by bats, whales, and dolphins.
What are the nitrogenous bases of DNA?
The nitrogenous bases have a ring of nitrogen and carbon atoms with various functional groups attached. There are two types of nitrogenous bases. They differ in their structure. Thymine and cytosine have a single ring structure, while adenine and guanine have double ring structures. When Watson and Crick were imagining how the bases would join together, they knew that the pairing had to be such that there was always a uniform diameter for the molecule. It therefore became apparent that a double ring base must always be paired with a single ring base on the opposite strand.
What is gradualism?
The Darwin-Wallace theory of evolution is based on gradualism, the idea that speciation occurs by the gradual accumulation of new traits. This would allow one species to gradually evolve into a different-looking one over many generations, which is the scale of evolutionary time.
Can animals behave altruistically?
Altruism is the performance of a behavior that will benefit the recipient at a cost to the donor, such as risking one's life to save another. There are numerous examples of animals exhibiting altruistic behavior. For instance, adult crows may act as nannies for other crows, instead of increasing their fitness by producing their own offspring. Another example is a ground squirrel that will warn others of the presence of a predator, even though making such a call may draw the attention of the predator to itself. In studying social insects, Edward O. Wilson, 1929, found that in many species of social insects, workers forego reproduction entirely, they are sterile, in order to help raise their sisters. There are two possible explanations for this behavior. The donor is performing the act either in hope that the recipient will someday return the favor, reciprocal altruism, or because the recipient is a family member. In the game of evolution, winners are those who leave the greatest number of copies of their genes in the subsequent generations. So this kin selection form of altruism may not be so altruistic after all.
Can cells be used as factories?
Humans have been using cells as factories for millennia. The production of cheese, yogurt, beer, and wine relies on the ability of individual cells to produce specific products, such as lactic acid and ethanol. More recently, scientists have been able to manipulate cell genes, so that cells will produce substances that have little relation to their normal function. Examples of products from bioengineered cell factories include the production of human insulin to treat diabetics and factor VIII, a naturally produced clotting factor in humans, for hemophiliacs.
What is the law of independent assortment?
This Mendelian principle deals with the prediction of the outcome of dihybrid, two-trait, crosses, such as the traits for seed shape, R equals round and R equals wrinkled, and seed color, G equals green and G equals yellow. If two true breeding plants are crossed, RRGG x RRGG, then all offspring would be heterozygous for both genes, RRGG, and would be round and green. By crossing these first-generation offspring, referred to as the F1 generation, among themselves, 4 phenotypic and 9 genotypic classes are generated. From this, Mendel concluded that traits are transmitted to offspring independently of one another. In other words, the separation of alleles for one trait does not influence or control the distribution of alleles from the second trait. This law holds true as long as the two traits in question are located on separate chromosomes, or are so distant from each other on the same chromosome that they sort independently.
What is a biomedic?
A biomimetic is a chemical reagent that can perform the function of a biological molecule. An example is a small molecular mimic of erythropoietin, the protein that causes release of red blood cells. Dolly the sheep was the first mammal to be successfully cloned.
What is the difference between an invertebrate and a vertebrate?
Invertebrates are animals that lack a backbone. Almost all animals, 99%, are invertebrates. Of the more than 1 million identified animals, only 42,500 have a vertebral column. These are referred to as vertebrates. Most biologists believe the millions of species that have yet to be discovered are exclusively invertebrates.
How does phenotype relate to genotype?
The phenotype is the physical manifestation of the genotype and the polypeptides it codes for. Consider the rose. The color and shape of the petals, the phenotype, are the result of chemical reactions within the cells of each petal. Polypeptides synthesized from the directions encoded within the cell's genes. The genotype are part of those reactions. Different versions of a gene will produce different polypeptides, which in turn will cause different molecular interactions and ultimately a different phenotype.
What is the most expensive spice in the world?
The world's most expensive spice is saffron. The spice was highly sought after by the ancient civilizations of Egypt, Assyria, Phoenicia, Persia, Crete, Greece, and Rome. The term saffron comes from the Arabic word za'faran, meaning yellow. The spice is obtained from the delicate stigmas of an autumn crocus. Crocus sativus, a species native to eastern Mediterranean countries and Asia Minor. Crocus sativus is propagated by corms. The blooming period for the crocus is approximately 2 weeks, after which the flowers must be picked while they are in full bloom and before any signs of wilting. Once picked, the 3-part stigmas are removed from the petals before the petals wilt. This is a time-consuming process that can only be done by hand as the stigmas are very fragile. Then the stigmas are roasted and sold either as whole threads, whole stigmas, or powder. In order to harvest 1 pound 0.45 kilograms of the spice, between 75,000 and 100,000 flowers must be picked. Approximately 4,000 stigmas yield 1 ounce, 28 gr, of the spice. In 1998 the retail price of saffron was approximately $240 per ounce. $8.50 per gram, confirming its place as the world's most costly spice.
How did humans evolve?
Evolution of the Homo lineage of modern humans, Homo sapiens, has been proposed to originate from a hunter of nearly 5 feet 1.5 meters tall, Homo habilis, who is widely presumed to have evolved from an Australopithecine ancestor. Near the beginning of the Pleistocene, 2 million years ago. Homo habilis is thought to have transformed into Homo erectus, Java man, who used fire and possessed culture. Middle Pleistocene populations of Homo erectus are said to show steady evolution toward the anatomy of Homo sapiens. Neanderthals, Cro-Magnons, and modern humans, 120,000 to 40,000 years ago. Pre-modern Homo sapiens built huts and made clothing.
What are the stationary and mobile phases of paper chromatography?
The stationary phase of paper chromatography is filter paper. And the mobile phase is an organic solvent or mixture. A small drop of the liquid mixture is placed at one end of the paper. The end of the paper is then immersed in a solvent. As the solvent moves up the paper, any molecules in the mixture that are soluble in the solvent will move with the solvent, based on their solubility to the mobile phase and attraction to the stationary phase. Some molecules will move faster than others. Each different molecule in the mixture will move at a different speed and will be at a different position on the finished chromatogram.
What is a virus?
A virus is an infectious, protein-coded fragment of DNA or RNA. Viruses replicate by invading host cells and taking over the cell's machinery for DNA replication. Viral particles can then break out of the cells, spreading disease.
What is the purpose of a mordant?
A mordant is a chemical added to the solution used to stain a specimen in order to intensify the stain. Two major functions of a mordant are to increase the affinity of a stain for a biological specimen, and to coat a structure to make it thicker and easier to see upon observation under the microscope.
What was one of the most famous criminal cases involving forensic botany?
Forensic botany is the identification of plants or plant products. This form of study can be used to produce evidence for legal trials. One of the first criminal cases to use forensic botany was the famous 1935 trial of Bruno Hauptmann. 1899 to 1936, who was accused, and later convicted, of kidnapping and murdering the son of Charles and Morrow Lindbergh. The botanical evidence presented in the case centered on a homemade wooden ladder used during the kidnapping and left at the scene of the crime. After extensive investigation, the plant anatomist Arthur Kohler, 1885 to 1967, showed that parts of the ladder were made from wooden planks taken from Hauptmann's attic floor.
How can genes be used to detect multi-gene disorders?
DNA chips and microarray technology can be used as a diagnostic tool when searching for multiple mutations that can be part of a multi-gene disease, such as some types of cancers. DNA chip technology is now being used to screen for mutations in the p53 gene. Approximately 60% of all cancers are linked to mutations of the p53 gene. Eventually, these methods will be used to collectively generate an individual genetic profile of all mutations associated with known genetic disorders.
What are the steps of the Gram stain?
Crystal violet, a primary stain, one that imparts its color to all cells, is applied to a heat-fixed smear. After a short time the crystal violet is washed off, and the smear is covered with iodine, a mordant. When the iodine is washed off, the bacteria appear dark violet or purple. The slide is then washed in an alcohol or alcohol acetone solution. This decolorizing agent removes the purple from the cell of some species but not from others. The alcohol is rinsed off, and the slide is then stained with safranine, a basic red dye. The smear is then washed again, blotted dry, and examined under a microscope. Gram-positive bacteria retain the purple dye, while those that lose the purple color are classified as gram-negative.
Who is considered the father of lichenology?
Eric Acharius, 1757 to 1819, is considered the father of lichenology. He was the founder of modern lichen taxonomy. Having described and arranged lichens into 40 distinct genera. His four major works of research: Lichenographus Wax Prodromus, 1798. Methodus Lichenum, 1803, Lichenographia Universalis, 1810. And Synopsis Methodica Lichenum, 1814, formed the foundations of modern lichenology.
What is the greenhouse effect?
The greenhouse effect is a warming near Earth's surface that results when Earth's atmosphere traps the sun's heat. The atmosphere acts much like the glass walls and roof of a greenhouse. This effect was first described by John Tyndall, 1820 to 1893, in 1861. It was given the greenhouse analogy much later, in 1896, by the Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius, 1859 to 1927. The greenhouse effect is what makes Earth habitable. Without the presence of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other gases in the atmosphere, too much heat would escape, and Earth would be too cold to sustain life. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and other greenhouse gases absorb the infrared radiation. rising from Earth and hold this heat in the atmosphere instead of reflecting it back into space. Various independent historical measurements conclude that the global average near surface temperature has increased by about 33 degrees Fahrenheit (0.5 degrees Celsius) over the past 100 years. In the 20th century, the increased buildup of carbon dioxide caused by the burning of fossil fuels has been linked to this increase. There is some controversy concerning whether the increase noted in Earth's average temperature is due to the increased amount of carbon dioxide and other gases or is due to other causes. In addition to the burning of fossil fuels, volcanic activity, destruction of the rainforests, use of aerosols, and increased agricultural activity may also be contributing factors.
What are GMO?
GMO are genetically modified organisms that have been created using new techniques of recombinant DNA technology. However, the term is misleading because almost all domesticated animals and crop plants have been genetically modified over thousands of years by human selection and crossbreeding. GMO are viewed with concern because of public debate over the safety of the products and the fear that GMO foods represent a type of biological pollution. The battle has been particularly intense in Europe, where GMO have been banned since 1998.
How does the dentition of animals reflect their diet?
Herbivores have sharp incisors to bite off blades of grass and other plant matter. They also have a system of flat premolars and molars for grinding and crushing grasses and plant matter. Carnivores have pointed incisors and enlarged canine teeth to tear off pieces of meat. Their premolars and molars are jagged to aid in chewing flesh. Omnivores have non-specialized teeth to accommodate a diet of both plant material and animals.
What are neurosecretory cells?
Neurosecretory cells are specialized nerve cells that produce and secrete hormones. Well-known examples of neurosecretory cells are oxytocin and vasopressin-secreting neurons in the hypothalamus and cells in the adrenal medulla. These cells are found in vertebrates and invertebrates.
What are the component molecules of DNA?
The full name of DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, with the nucleic part coming from the location of DNA in the nuclei of eukaryotic cells. DNA is actually a polymer, long strand, of nucleotides. A nucleotide has three component parts: a phosphate group, a 5-carbon sugar, deoxyribose, and a nitrogen base. If you visualize DNA as a ladder, the sides of the ladder are made of the phosphate and deoxyribose molecules. And the rungs are made of two different nitrogen bases. The nitrogen bases are the crucial part of the molecule with regard to genes. Specific sequences of nitrogen bases make up a gene.
What is sociobiology?
Sociobiology, which is considered by some as a subdiscipline of behavioral ecology, is the study of the social organization of a species. Sociobiology attempts to develop rules that explain the evolution of certain social systems.
What is the difference between catabolic and anabolic reactions?
Catabolic and anabolic reactions are metabolic processes. Both the capture and use of energy by organisms involves a series of thousands of reactions, metabolism. A catabolic reaction is one that breaks down large molecules to produce energy, an example is digestion. An anabolic reaction is one that involves creating large molecules out of smaller molecules. An example is when your body makes fat out of extra nutrients you eat.
Which group of animals has exceptionally well-developed brown fat?
Mammalian hibernators have exceptionally well-developed brown fat. Some scientists even refer to it as the hibernation gland. The supply of brown fat is used during the winter months when the animal hibernates and is built up during the spring and summer. Brown fat is important in the revarming process that the animal undergoes after hibernation.
Who is considered the founder of experimental zoology?
Abraham Tremblay, 1710 to 1784, a Swiss scientist, is considered the founder of experimental zoology. Much of his research involved studying the regeneration of hydras.
Do centipedes actually have 100 legs and millipedes have more than 1,000 legs?
Centipedes, class Chilopoda, always have an uneven number of pairs of walking legs, varying from 15 to more than 171. The true centipedes, order Scolopendromorpha, have 21 or 23 pairs of legs. Common house centipedes, Sciotidera coleoptrado, have 15 pairs of legs. Centipedes are all carnivorous and feed mainly on insects. Millipedes, class Diplopoda, have 30 or more pairs of legs. They are herbivores, feeding mainly on decaying vegetation.
What is a bioreactor?
A bioreactor is a large vessel in which a biological reaction or transformation occurs. Bioreactors are used in bioprocessing technology to carry out large-scale mammalian cell culture and microbial fermentation.
What is the Innocence Project?
The Innocence Project is a public law clinic at the Benjamin Cardozo Law School in New York that uses biotechnology, specifically DNA evidence, to reopen cases of people who have been wrongly convicted of crimes.
Do bacteriostats, sanitizers, disinfectants, and sterilizers control microorganisms the same way?
The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, classifies antimicrobial agents as 118 non-public health products and public health products. Non-public health products are products used to control the growth of algae, odor-causing bacteria, microorganisms infectious only to animals, and bacteria that cause spoilage, deterioration, or fouling of materials. Examples of non-public health products are jet fuel, paints, and treatments for both textile and paper products. Public health products control microorganisms infectious to humans in any inanimate environment. Bacteriostats, sanitizers, disinfectants, and sterilizers are all public health products. Sanitizers are used to reduce, not eliminate, microorganisms from inanimate environments to levels considered safe as determined by public health codes or regulations. Non-food contact sanitizers are used on dishes, utensils, and equipment found in dairies and food processing plants. Non-food contact sanitizers include carpet sanitizers, air sanitizers, laundry additives, and in-tank toilet sanitizers. Disinfectants are used on hard, inanimate surfaces and objects in order to destroy or irreversibly inactivate infectious bacteria, but not necessarily their spores. Disinfectants are classified according to whether they will be used in hospital or general environments. Hospital disinfectants are critical to infection control and are used on both medical and dental instruments. Floors, walls, bed linens, and toilet seats. Sterilizers, also called sporicides, destroy all forms of microbial life and their spores. Sterilization is crucial to infection control, and the process is widely used in hospitals as well as on medical instruments and equipment. Examples of sterilizers are autoclaves, dry heat ovens, low-temperature gas, and liquid chemical sterilants.
What is an enzyme?
Enzymes are proteins that act as biological catalysts. They decrease the amount of energy needed, activation energy, to start a metabolic reaction. Without enzymes, you would not be able to harvest energy and nutrients from your food. As an example, lactose intolerance is an inability to produce lactase, the enzyme that breaks down milk sugar, lactose. While this condition is not life-threatening for adults, it can have severe consequences for infants and children.
What are the special challenges of producing effective antifungal drugs?
Since fungi are eukaryotic, their cellular structure is similar to, if not the same as, that of animals and humans. Drugs that affect metabolic pathways in fungi often affect corresponding pathways in host cells, which can result in the host sustaining drug toxicity. Many antifungal drugs can only be used topically. Very few drugs have been found to be selectively toxic, that is, toxic to fungi and not their human hosts.
What organism has the smallest cellular genome?
The microorganism Mycoplasma genitalium has the smallest known cellular genome, consisting of 580,070 base pairs. A base pair is a couple of hydrogen-bonded nitrogenous bases, one purine and one pyrimidine, that join the component strands of the DNA double helix. By comparison, Escherichia coli has 4,639,221 base pairs.
What is biofarming?
Biofarming is a relatively new technology in which transgenic plants are used to grow pharmaceuticals. In this technique, scientists bioengineer medically important proteins into a corn plant, thus spurring the corn plant to produce large amounts of a particular medicinal protein. This is less expensive than using a microbial fermentation chamber.
What is Thomas Hunt Morgan's contribution to genetics?
Thomas Hunt Morgan, 1866 to 1945, won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1933 for his discovery of the role played by chromosomes in heredity. He is perhaps most noted for his fly lab at Columbia University in New York, where he collected Drosophila, fruit fly, mutants. Morgan studied fruit flies much in the same way that Mendel studied peas. He found that the inheritance of certain characteristics, such as eye color, was affected by the sex of the offspring.
How are antibiotics produced today?
Until the mid-1950s, all antibiotics were products of microorganisms. In the late 1950s researchers succeeded in synthesizing the nucleus of Penicillium notatum. This achievement allowed for various new groups to be attached to the synthesized nucleus, which paved the way for new forms of penicillin to be created. Synthesized antibiotics use natural molecules and add side chains that create a drug more effective than penicillin.
How do animals know which direction to travel?
The ability to navigate from one place to another is found among a diverse group of species. While it is well known that birds can navigate over long distances, many people are unaware that bats, salmon, locusts, and frogs are also capable of this behavior. Animals use a variety of cues to find their way, including the position of the sun, moon, and stars. Topographic features of the landscape, meteorological cues, e.g., prevailing winds and magnetic fields are also used by certain animals.
What are some important antifungal drugs and their mechanism of operation?
Many antifungal drugs work by interfering with the function or synthesis of ergosterol. Ergosterol is found in the cytoplasmic membrane of fungal cells but is not found in human cells. Some antifungal drugs interfere with fungus-specific structures and functions, such as the cell wall.
What is gene expression?
Gene expression refers to the molecular product of a particular gene and is another way of describing the phenotype. The phenotype of an organism is a result of the chemical interactions that are guided by the DNA. Gene blueprint, for a specific polypeptide.
What is agar?
Agar is a polysaccharide extract of red algae that is used as a solidifying material in microbiological media. Agar was developed as a culture media for bacteria by Robert Koch, 1843 to 1910. Koch was interested in the isolation of bacteria in pure culture. Because isolation was difficult in liquid media, he began to study ways in which bacteria could be grown on solid media. After sterile, boiled potatoes proved unsatisfactory, a better alternative was suggested by Fanny E. Hesse, 1850 to 1934, the wife of Walther Hesse, 1846 to 1911, who was one of Koch's assistants. She suggested that agar, which she had used to thicken sauces, jams, and jellies, be used to solidify liquid nutrient broth. Agar is generally inexpensive and, once gelled, does not melt until reaching a temperature of 212 degrees Fahrenheit 100 degrees Celsius. if 1 to 2 g of agar are added to 100 ml of nutrient broth, it produces a solid medium that is not degraded by most bacteria.
What are the different types of natural selection?
There are several ways in which natural selection can cause a population to change. Natural selection can cause a trait to change in one direction only. For example, when individuals within a population grow taller with each generation, this is known as directional selection. Diversifying selection can cause the loss of individuals in the mid-range of a trait. For example, if there is a range in color of a certain prey species from very dark to very light, those individuals in the mid-color range may not be able to hide from predators. The mid-color prey will then be selectively removed from the population, leaving the population with only two forms, the very dark and the very light. In stabilizing selection, those at either end of the range are removed more often, creating selection pressure for the mid-range. Selection can also work on traits important to sexual reproduction. This is known as sexual selection.